Hey there, everyone. I am just taking a few moments and making sure that this video is streaming. Hey there, everyone. Oh, right, we're go. Awesome. Hi there. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Hughes, and if you're watching, hey, I want to take a moment and just say thanks for watching. Um, I enjoy doing these videos, and I love knowing that people are watching them. So, hey, thank you very much. Today, I want to talk about the concept of cognitive dissonance and how that relates to medicine, and give a concrete example that you might relate to. So, cognitive dissonance, I think we all know what it is, but let me just give like some words to that. Cognitive dissonance occurs when you're being presented with facts that don't make logical sense, but being told that they do make logical sense. It's that grating between what your the objective evidence and what you're being told is true, when those two things don't match. And when I think about cognitive dissonance, I often think about it sort of even more on the level of gut wisdom. It's when your logical mind believes something that your heart says, oh, I don't like that. And your gut says, that ain't true. And even part of your brain will say, this doesn't make sense. And yet, why is it that that's what I'm believing? That's what I'm being told. That's cognitive dissonance. I don't want to discount the damage that living with constant cognitive dissonance, that's hard to say, constant cognitive dissonance. Don't discount the damage that actually does to you. It may not be damage that you can see, in terms of anatomical change to the brain. It may not even be something that you can really see on a functional MRI, but it doesn't mean that it's not damaging. Living with constant cognitive dissonance, see, I said it right that time. See, living in that state does change the subtle pattern of how you respond to your environment. It just does. And if there was a way to detect at such a microanatomic level, you would be able to see that the brain is misfiring, that the wires are crossed, and that the brain is not functioning properly. You're not using all of your brain, because when you are stuck in a state where cognitive dissonance is your norm, there's a tremendous amount of your brain power being used to notice the problem, then tell yourself the problem doesn't exist and suppress your discomfort about the problem, and then remind yourself of how you should be thinking, and then ignore the problem, and around and around and around. I truly, genuinely wish there was a way to look at how much energy is spent in the brain not noticing the cognitive dissonance or suppressing that. The brain just doesn't function on all cylinders, because many of the cylinders are spent trying to reconcile or the unreconcilable, or suppress the unreconcilable cognitive dissonance that you experience. All right. I want to give a really concrete example of this type of thinking, where cognitive dissonance might show up. And I'm going to give a really, really concrete example here. So, because I'm old, I had the opportunity to live in East Berlin during the time that Berlin and the East Bloc was undergoing integration into the West. Technically, there still was an East Berlin, but Russia had fallen, Poland had fallen, the East Berlin was sort of crumbling. And even though this was a setback in my educational career, I knew that this was such an important time to, be in Berlin and get to live in East Berlin, that I took it. Like, screw it. I know this doesn't look linear. This is not a linear trajectory, but I'm like, I am not missing this moment in history that I had the opportunity to live there for a year. So I lived in East Berlin when there was still a kind of East Germany. So in East Berlin, there were beautiful, majestic avenues and plazas and buildings, but the place at its heyday was like a ghost town. It was like Disneyland after hours or something like that. It's like, where are all the people? Where is everyone? I could walk down Unter den Linden, which is, the big street, the big majestic street that leads to the Brandenburg Gate, which is lined with office buildings and government buildings. I could walk down Unter den Linden and be the only person there at noon, like on a work day. Like, where are the people, right? Where are the people? I lived in an apartment where I could see West Berlin out my window in my living room. Like, there was West Berlin, you could see it. Now, I was a Westerner, American passport. I was living in a place where the East German government put the Westerners because you could see West Berlin right there. And, like, they just couldn't have their own citizens live that close to the wall. But, the fact that there was another culture was right there. Like, you couldn't escape it. If you were in West Berlin, or excuse me, if you were in East Berlin or anywhere near the East German, West German border, it didn't have to be in Berlin, but I was in Berlin, you could hear West Berlin. I mean, you could tune into the radio stations. You'd have to keep it quiet, but they couldn't jam the radio station, because then the people in West Berlin wouldn't be able to hear it, and that turns into a governmental blow up. So you could get West German radio, you could get West German TV. You did it really quietly, but everybody knew that you could do it. And you could literally hear and see a different place. So that, you might have been blocks away, but just the same way that, I'm 10 blocks from the highway here. And if I stopped talking and I got really quiet, I can hear the highway, whirring out in the distance. You could hear West Germany in the distance, and you knew it was there. And you could see the buildings. It was hard not to, even if much of the wall wasn't really just one wall. It was actually a series of walls and dead spaces in between. But even that, it was obvious that there was something there. So as an East German, you lived in a regime that said, we're doing fine. This is the best place. We have everything right. We are the glorious communist state, or whatever it is. And please ignore the people over there in West Berlin, because their society is falling apart. Their society is corrupt. They are evil. They are wrong. They are the enemy. They are bad. And but if you were East German, you could see that over there on the other side of the wall looked fun and inviting and exciting, and you could hear things that were completely different, but you were stuck on this side of the wall, and you had to believe, or you were being told you had to believe, the opposite of what you were seeing with your eyes. Cognitive dissonance right there. So East Berlin was apparently a lovely place to grow up. Like what I've heard is that as a child, East Germany was a great place to grow up. But once you got to a certain age where you could start to discern things, East Germany became a very unpleasant place to live. And for this reason, the suicide rate in East Germany was about 50% higher than that in West Germany. Now, officially, the East Germans stopped looking at their suicide rate somewhere in the mid 70s because, they just said, oh, we're not studying it anymore. They're Germans. They keep statistics on everything. Germans keep statistics on everything. Yes, they knew exactly what it was, but anybody looking would know that the long-term life of living with cognitive dissonance, where what you're being told is true is conflicting with reality, it does something wrong to your brain. And people are, deeply unhappy in a way that they can't even put a finger on, because much of their mind is so tied up in trying to keep up with suppressing what they're seeing or not paying attention or managing the cognitive dissonance. And you can't tell, like, why does everything feel off? And so you end up with a suicide rate that's 50% higher, just on the other side of the wall, right? And I will also say that there's a lot of alcohol in Eastern Europe. This isn't Germany, but this is Czechoslovakia. So the first time I went to the Eastern Bloc, I went to Prague, to Czechoslovakia. It was Czechoslovakia at the time; they hadn't broken up. And we arrived. I was with a large group. We arrived from Frankfurt, and were told by a group of the crew for Czech Air. The crew for Czech Air. It was 2:00 in the afternoon on like a Monday or something. Yeah, it was 2:00 in the afternoon on a Monday. Everybody was drinking beer. Everybody, the ground crew, everybody was drinking beer. And, and the half of our group's luggage had been lost. You'll get it eventually. This is what cognitive dissonance does. It actually crushes the spirit, and people need to, self-medicate with alcohol or whatever it is, and in order to stay sane, or at least suppress that roaring, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, that's going on in their head. And you end up with a suicide rate, you end up with alcoholism, drug addiction, depression, whatever it is. And all of these things were rampant in Eastern Bloc countries. So Hungary had a very high suicide rate as well. So it's this is what living in cognitive dissonance does. Okay. So what does that have to do with medicine? People go into medicine for a whole variety of reasons. But at the core, it's an idea that I'm going to be able to help people. I'm going to be able to make a difference in lives. I am going to be able to support myself well while I do that. I'm going to be able to have some autonomy about how I run my life. I am going to have a set of skills that's going to make me valuable in the world. And these are great things. Doesn't everybody want that? I mean, like, if everybody went into the world thinking, I'm going to make the world better, I'm going to have special skills that are going to help, I'm going to have personal autonomy, I'm going to make a difference, all of that is wonderful stuff. But the reality of medical training is exactly the opposite. The reality of medical training tells you, turn over your autonomy to us. We will tell you what to do. And if you don't do what we tell you to do, even if it doesn't make sense, you will not be successful. You will fail a class, you will get a bad recommendation or something like that. People are told that they will have be valued. And yet medical training puts medical trainees at the very lowest level of the totem pole, so that you end up doing things like what I observed a second-year medical student at the Seattle Children's Hospital here, second-year medical student being sort of like in the corner watching the front desk clerks at the emergency room. I had to take my son to the emergency room on a Friday night, being totally ignored. The second-year medical student was just sort of flat back against the wall, being totally ignored by the clerks, not getting any actual education, but being told this is essential for your education. And you don't show up, you don't get the grade. And yet it doesn't make any sense. The same thing happens all the time. I need to sleep, but I can't sleep because that's how I care for people better, right? I need to eat regularly, but you can't eat, and because that's how you learn to care for people better. I need to have a personal life, but you can't have a personal life because it's essential for you to learn to care for people better. Some of the things that we do in our education makes no sense. And we have to live with this cognitive dissonance if we want to be successful. The problem is that these pathways in our brain of automatic response become automatic. They are our automatic go-to pattern. So when you are in the future, if you're up against a bureaucracy that tells you this is how it's done, well, your automatic pattern of I need to submit to this takes over. And the cognitive dissonance grows. Like, no, this policy doesn't make sense. This thing I'm being asked to do isn't safe. It isn't something that I would do for myself. If I had a choice, it isn't something that I do for myself, but I have to accept it because it's how things are. And this is where your cognitive dissonance comes in. You do not underestimate the fact that as a medical trainee, you spent a minimum of 7 years in a system that is instilled this cognitive dissonance. You had to accept all of the large and small indignities and nonsensical rules and regulations in order to get where you are. But don't underestimate the fact that that has actually changed your body, your brain's automatic response system to one that is not functional if you're going to get what you really want. That's not functional for you, that is not functional or safe for you, that keeps you from standing up and taking care of the injustices and inconsistencies and the wrongs that you see going on in medicine in general, because it's not just doctors that are suffering in this world of cognitive dissonance. It is also patients who are getting unusual treatment that nobody would actually choose for themselves, but it's what an insurance company will pay for, or it's what the insurance mandate is, or what the protocol, it's what the procedure is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Long-term living with cognitive dissonance changes your brain's function. And medical training is an exercise in living with and accepting the cognitive dissonance. And when you've done that for a minimum of 7 years, it becomes normal. You don't necessarily see what it's done in terms of changing your brain. And it gets to the point where you believe that this is okay. And yet part of you doesn't feel okay. Part of you doesn't. And whether you call this burnout, whether you call this a moral injury, whatever it is, I don't care what you call it, because how you label what happened in the past does not matter to me. What matters to me is that you build the new appropriate adult responses to this cognitive dissonance, that you undo those automatic thought patterns that you've developed as a survival technique to get through medical training, and that you're continuing to use as a survival technique to work in a medical system that makes no sense. I don't care what you call it. What I do know is that there's a dysfunction, there's a disconnect, there is cognitive dissonance, and that cognitive dissonance needs to be dissolved and needs to be addressed. And you need to have your brain firing on all cylinders in order to be what you wanted to be when you started to go into medical school. In order to really make a difference in people's health, you need to step out of the medical box. It's like breaking through the Berlin Wall, except it's in your mind. You need to step out, step aside, and step into the doctor that you wanted to be when you started medical school, the person you wanted to be. And it might not look like doctoring as we know it now. It might look totally different. But that is the next step. That is the next evolution that medicine needs, not more technology. It needs some clear thinking people whose brains are firing on all cylinders to step forward and really make a change in the medical system. This is what I've got for you today. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. And I love comments. Comment below. Love to hear what you